welcome to my channel. Today we will be working on this cropped bell sleeve cardigan that I have a written pattern for. These are the measurements and materials that you will need, so please feel free to pause the screen before starting. And let's begin. So these are the materials that I am personally using today. I'm using weight 4 of these Caron cakes, and I probably used 400 grams, or less than because mine is ultra cropped. I'm using a 6.5mm hook, but like I said, you are welcome to use any weight yarn and hook size with these Hexagon projects. And really quickly, this is what the end project of mine will look like today. So let's get started. Okay, go ahead and start with your preference of the magic ring or the alternative loop. I am just going to chain 5 and slip stitch into the first chain to close my loop. This is my preferred method. We're going to start making 6 clusters. So chain 3 counts as your first double crochet, 2 more double crochet into that same loop. This counts as our first cluster. We're going to chain 3, 3 more double crochet into the same loop. This is our second cluster. You're going to chain 3 and repeat this 4 more times. You will have a total of 6 clusters and 6 chain 3 spaces. So I'm going to speed this next part up for this first round. If you've never made a hexagon before, it's very similar to a granny square, but instead of your 4 clusters and 4 chain spaces, you're actually going to have 6 clusters and 6 chain spaces. So this will create the 6 sides for a hexagon. So 3 double crochet is a cluster, chain 3 between your clusters, and we will slip stitch to the beginning chain 3 to close. Okay, and at the end of round 1, you should have 6 clusters and 6 chain 3 spaces. To start round 2, we're going to slip stitch until we are in the chain 3 space. I prefer this, but if you are switching colors, you can just attach your new yarn here. We're going to chain 3, counts as our first double crochet, 2 more double crochet into that same chain space. You're going to chain 3, 3 more double crochet into that same chain space. We've just created our first increase in one of the 6 corners, and we're going to repeat that around. So in the next corner, insert 3 double crochet, chain 3, and then 3 more double crochet. And we're going to repeat this process all the way around. So each of the chain spaces should have 1 cluster, chain 3, 1 cluster. And this helps increase the size of our hexagons. I went ahead and completed round 2 mostly off camera, but once you get back to the beginning, you're just going to end with a slip stitch in that beginning chain 3. And as you can see, we have increases in all 6 corners, and each corner should have 1 cluster, chain 3, 1 cluster. To begin round 3, slip stitch a couple more times until you are in that chain 3 space, or just attach your new yarn there. In every chain 3 space, we're always going to have our increases. So starting now, we're going to chain 3, counts as your first double crochet, 2 more double crochet into that same space, chain 3, 3 more double crochet into that same chain 3 space. Now, before we get to our next corner, there is a cluster that we need to create on the side. So we're always going to insert side clusters in between the previous clusters. So in between that space, insert 3 double crochet. And once you're done with that side cluster, in this chain 3 space, you're going to insert 1 cluster, chain 3, 1 cluster. And we're just going to repeat this all the way down. So that space in between the clusters on the sides, you will just insert 1 cluster. And that chain 3 space in the corners, you will insert 1 cluster, chain 3, 1 cluster. So 1 cluster in between each space on the sides, an increase in each of the 6 corners. And I will meet you at the end. Okay, I am almost at the end. I'm going to finish off with my last cluster in that space and slip stitch to the beginning chain 3. So for the end of round 3, you should have 18 clusters total, 3 for each side. In round 2, you should have 12 total. I went ahead and completed round 4 off camera, so you can just pause the video if you need to get a better view. Round 4 will end with 24 clusters, so 4 on each of the 6 sides. And as you can see, I have my 6 increased corners. They each have 1 cluster, chain 3, 1 cluster. and in between each space on the sides I have one cluster. And completed round 5 off camera, and round 5 will have 30 clusters total. I want to show you how to measure the project. So as you work your rounds, use your measuring tape and compare this to your underarm measurements. Okay, I will show you a better example after I complete a couple more rounds because this is way too small. Okay, I went ahead and completed a couple more rounds off camera. You're going to fold your panel into this L shape. This is why the warping is so important, so we can get this flat panel. I like to take my measuring tape this way and start from the top of the panel to the armpit area. And as you can see, my sleeve hole opening needs a couple more inches, so I will complete a couple more rounds. Do this and compare this to your own underarm measurement as you continue to create this hexagon. I went ahead and completed 10 total rounds to meet my own measurement. On the 10th round, you should have 60 clusters if you make it that far. This is one way that you can take your measurement as you create your hexagon panel. Measure from the center outward. You could also, like I've shown you before, create your L panel by folding your hexagon in half. You can measure from, again, the center outward. And I have met my underarm measurement for about 8 inches. I will now show you how to seam up the top of your arm. Okay, seams are always on the inside of our project, so I'm going to flip this the other way to expose the wrong side. I have not cut my yarn, so I am actually just going to continue with the corner that I am in. Okay, so I am just going to insert my hook into both of the chain 3 corners to connect them. I am going to make a slip stitch. And I prefer to do single crochet stitches as my seam, but you can do a slip stitch method if you also prefer. So I'm just going to chain 1 and insert 1 single crochet into both of those double crochet stitches. And I'm going to continue this process in each stitch all the way down until my seam fully closes this side. Continue with the seam method until you get to that last chain 3 space. Don't forget to connect to your panels and seam in this last space. Now we're going to start working rounds on the right side of our project, so you need to turn your project inside out so the seam is on the inside. And I apologize for completing that first round off camera, but basically you were going to start on the right side with your seam on the inside and insert 3 double crochet into each chain 3 space and each regular space between clusters all the way around. So once you get to the beginning, you're going to slip stitch a couple more times, close that round, and start working between clusters again. And we're going to repeat this for our straight sleeve several more rounds until we get to our elbow measurement or about halfway down our sleeve length. So to start that second round, you're going to chain 3, 2 more double crochet into the same space, and then 1 cluster in each of the remaining spaces around. So there are no increases these next couple rounds until we get to about on or past our elbow. And then again, once you get to the beginning, slip stitch a couple more times and start your next round in between clusters. And again, to figure out when to stop creating these straight rounds, you're going to need a measuring tape, and you can measure from your armpit to your elbow, or you can just take your sleeve length measurement and divide it in half. So I'm about on and slightly past my elbow, and I'm ready to make increase rounds. This is an example of what our flare will start to look like when we make our increase rounds. So go ahead and keep doing your straight sleeve until you get to your elbow or slightly past your elbow. I already have my rounds out to my elbow, and I am ready to start with my first increase. So depending on the size and sleeve opening that you have, you can either do 2 increases each round or 3 to 4 increases. I have a smaller armhole opening, so I'm only going to do 2 increases each round, but this is really based on your preference. To start this round, you are going to chain 3, counts as your first double crochet, and you are going to insert 2 more double crochet into that same stitch. you are going to chain 1 and insert 3 more double crochet into that same space. This counts as our first cluster, and I'm going to make my second cluster about halfway around. If you are doing 3 or 4 clusters, then just try to evenly space them out. So in the next space, I'm just inserting 1 regular cluster. Okay, I put 1 cluster in each space about halfway around. Now I'm ready for my second increase, where I'm going to insert 3 double crochet, chain 1, 3 double crochet into 1 space. I'm going to finish the round off with 1 cluster in each space around to the beginning. Once there, I'm going to slip stitch to that chain 3 we started with and close that round. Now to start this next round, you need to keep making slip stitches until you are in between your clusters, just like we've been doing. So start this next round in that chain 1 space, or just in between any cluster space. We're going to do a regular round now with 1 cluster in each space around. So chain 3, 2 more DC into the same space, 1 cluster in each of the remaining spaces around. There are no increases this round, and repeat till you get to the beginning with 1 cluster in each space. Okay, I finished my regular round and I am ready for another increase round. Now I like to stagger my increases. I don't like to put them directly on top of each other, just next to each other kind of. I will show you what I mean. But I am doing 2 increases again this round. You are welcome to do 3 or 4 or however many increases you like. This is especially necessary for larger sleeve openings. So I'm going to start with a chain 3 and insert 2 more into that same space to complete my first cluster. I did a couple of regular clusters before my first increase. And again, for that increase, you're going to insert 3 double crochet, chain 1, 3 double crochet into the same space. I'm going to work a couple more regular clusters until I am on the opposite side of my arm opening, and then I will insert my second increase. And after my second increase, I'm just going to continue with regular clusters until the end of the round. Once you are at the end of your round, slip stitch to the beginning chain 3 to close. And again, slip stitch a couple more times until you are working between your clusters. Now this next round is just going to be a regular round with no increases, and we're just going to repeat this process until you get to your desired flare sleeve opening. So this next round, no increases, 3 double crochet in each space around, slip stitch to the beginning to close, and then the round after will be another increase. And off camera, I alternated and completed a few more increase and regular rounds until I reached my desired sleeve opening. This is really just based on personal preference. Once you get to your desired flare, you can just repeat regular rounds until you reach your sleeve length. So this can be your wrist or your fingertips, but I'm just going to repeat a couple more regular rounds off camera to get my sleeve length. I personally had about 4 increase rounds total and finished the rest of my sleeve off with regular rounds. Once you are done with this, you need to repeat the exact same process with the exact same amount of rounds for your second panel and sleeve. And once both of your panels and arms are complete, it is time to seam together. But before we create our seam, it is important that we measure and make sure that it can fit our back. So basically, I typically measure from either my shoulder to shoulder or my armpit to armpit and compare this to my panel here. So it looks like I need to add several more inches to meet my own shoulder to shoulder measurement. Otherwise, this will be a really tight fitting. To do this, we are basically going to extend both of the panels back. This is pretty easy. We'll just do a couple rows of clusters and then seam together. So I need about 4 rows to meet my own personal measurements. And if this does not apply to you, then just skip to the next section where we go ahead and seam it together. So insert your yarn and hook into this chain 3 corner space. You're going to chain 3, counts as your first double crochet. Skip over to the next space and insert a cluster. We're going to repeat this down to the end of the row with a cluster in each space, and then in that last stitch you're just going to end with 1 double crochet. This will help flatten out our back panels instead of rounding them out. So in this last chain 3 space, insert 1 double crochet. To start this next row, if you need more back coverage, you're going to chain 3, turn your work, 2 double crochet into that same space to finish off that cluster. Now insert 1 cluster in each space down until you get to the end. And don't forget to insert a cluster in that last chain 3. Okay, and you can continue alternating these rows, but be careful because we need to do the exact same on the opposite panel so that our seam is in the middle. So I'm going to take my second panel and repeat the same 2 rows because I think that 4 rows is all that I will personally need before seaming them together. Okay, repeating those 2 rows on my second panel. And once you are done, we can now work on seaming them, but repeat these rows as many times as you need to get your shoulder to shoulder measurements. Okay, now we are going to connect these panels together. Once you get your desired back coverage, take them, flip them like this so we can seam them together. Make sure that your seam is going to be on the inside of your project too and not on the outside where everyone can see. We're going to do just like we did for the arm closing, and we're going to make either slip stitches or seam crochet stitches in each stitch all the way down to the end to close up this back panel and connect them together. After your seam, if you find that this is too cropped, you can extend the bottom length coverage the exact same way that we extended the back coverage. So you just be alternating rows 1 and 2 for extension on this bottom row. So you would need to start with row 1 of a double crochet in the first stitch, cluster in each stitch until the end, and then you would end with a double crochet. And then your next row would just be clusters in each stitches and alternate those to your desired length. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this project. Thank you so much for tuning in today.